about what lacrosse is about. It's not just about winning, it's about developing kids and teaching them the right attitudes. A great person, umpired many world games, and it's just a special privilege for us to be able to thank her and honor her. And to introduce Susie, I'm going to bring up Pat Dillon, last year's inductee.
Susan L. Ganzenmuller is a highly regarded college and high school official, a dedicated national and local leader in lacrosse organizations, an 11-time NCAA Final Four umpire, a rules and umpiring VP of IFWLA, a 2-time IFWLA World Cup umpire, a chair of USWLA National Umpiring Committee, a Wells College graduate, an Outstanding Service Award recipient, and a passionate advocate of umpire development and player safety.
Don't worry about the umpire putting your glasses on. Smart remarks now. Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to stand before you tonight and speak about not only a fellow umpire, but also a very good friend. You can read all about Susie and her accomplishments in your programs. The NCAA tournaments she's done, the World Cup games she's done, all the committees she's led and served on. But I think it's my job tonight to tell you some things about Susie that you won't find in the program. She's shaking over there now. She's unfailingly polite. She's been known to apologize to her partners on the field in the middle of a game. In one memorable instance, the lead umpire, who was at the goal at the time, was about to signal goal, only to turn and find Susie standing right next to her, also blowing her whistle and signaling goal. Well, that's not the way you're supposed to be doing things. So there was lots of, I'm sorry, I'm just so sorry. She's a great hostess. When she schedules umpires for fall ball tournaments, she'll invariably be the one to bring the food, the drinks, and the snacks, and keep us all happy and well fed. And that's one reason why we all keep coming back when she asks us. She's a wonderful traveling companion. On all the road games, more often than not, she'll volunteer to be the driver, which I love. She loves to eat in good restaurants, and best of all, she's willing to share her desserts. She's also quite an international traveler. She once took a Tylenol PM to help her sleep on a memorable but seemingly endless flight to Australia, and she promptly fell into a deep sleep. Such a deep sleep, in fact, that she never moved in her seat. The entire U.S. team and Sue Stahl, the head coach, was on the plane with Susie, and were so worried about her and the fact that she never moved and didn't seem to be breathing that they took turns walking past her seat to make sure she was still alive. She's also very punctual, and she absolutely hates to arrive late to a game. 1 hour ahead of time is the norm, usually 2. Now, even the best laid plans don't always work. I'm sure her fellow umpire, Fran Trumbo, won't forget the trip with Susie last year when they got stuck in a massive traffic jam. They finally broke free of all the traffic, and knowing they were barely going to make it by game time, they decided they would have a plan where they would alternate changing into their uniforms in the back seat of the car while they sped down I-95 heading to Richmond. Well, when Fran expressed some reluctance about changing in full view of all the truckers, Susie borrowed a famous phrase from a certain shoe company. Fran, just do it. It was quite a memorable moment for poor Fran. But on a more serious note, I read a quote in the Washington Post this week about someone, and I really think this applies to Susie. When I read it, because I've been thinking about my speech here tonight, Susie really truly came to mind. She's someone who commands admiration without inflaming jealousy. Susie is prepared without being a know-it-all, is full of common sense, patient to a fault, and she shuns the limelight most of all. She loves nothing more than simply being out on the field with the players and her fellow umpires. I'm honored to be able to introduce my good friend, Susie Ganzenmuller, and welcome her to the U.S. Lacrosse Potomac Chapter Hall of Fame.
Oh my gosh, that's a hard act to follow. Thank you, Pat. I have to put on my glasses too, I hate to say it, but I can see forever without them, but I can't see up close. Thank you, Pat, for your kind words and your friendship over the past 13 years. To the hosts, the Board of Directors of Potomac Lacrosse, thank you for selecting me to receive this honor and for organizing this wonderful celebration. I also congratulate each of my fellow inductees. Congratulations to you all. I've umpired many games at Georgetown and NCS, and have come to know and respect Kim and Susan for their coaching excellence. My most memorable game was the 2001 NCAA Division I Women's Final, Georgetown versus Maryland. Georgetown fought back from an 8-1 deficit at halftime to tie the game at the end of regulation. Unfortunately, you lost in overtime. That game was the most exciting, intense, well-played, well-coached game I've ever been a part of. It was great. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. Officiating has broadened my circle of friends. Some of my best are here tonight, my road sisters. Together we shared some memorable road trips, games, and a lot of laughs. I'm pleased that Patty and Margaret are here tonight. The Washington Lacrosse Umpires Association has a bright future with these rising stars as our new leaders. Thank you. Thanks to my friends and family who braved the weather to share this evening with us. My mother taught me well about the importance of giving back and commitment. And 35 years ago, I am blessed to have married my best friend. Tuck has been my biggest supporter and counselor during this part of my journey in life. I'm honored to be in the company of so many here who share my passion for lacrosse. In my opinion, the women's lacrosse played well, showcases feminine grace, strength, and athleticism more than any other game women play. Officiating has allowed me to participate in a game that I never played or coached, but I fell in love with from the first time I ever saw a game played. I love to officiate. I love being on the field with the athletes and strive to be a strong role model for them. I truly respect their skill and hope in turn that I earn their respect and trust. Being an official has taught me to make split-second decisions and to take responsibility for all of them. I have gained the courage to stand by my convictions and to temper this with the humility to admit and correct my mistakes. Officiating has honed the values most important to me in life: respect, honesty, fair play, and sportsmanship. I receive a great deal of satisfaction from helping other officials improve their skills. Teaching others not only benefits them, but improves my officiating as well. The game is better for that. I truly identify with what former NFL official Jim Tunney once said. If you emerge the quest for excellence with the credo of fairness, officiating gets inside of you. It ceases to be something you do in your spare time, and officiating becomes who you are. For the past 24 years, officiating has defined my life. Thank you so much for this honor.
Edward J. Kostolansky is an exemplary service contributor to the growth of lacrosse, a two-time U.S. Lacrosse Service Award recipient, head coach of Seneca Valley High School, two-time Coach of the Year in Montgomery County, a Boston College graduate where he was a captain and high-scoring attackman, a New England Collegiate All-Star, a leading advocate of varsity status for lacrosse in Montgomery County, and a pioneer of high school and youth lacrosse in the D.C. metro area.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to see that so many of us braved the weather to be here tonight to honor all of these great people of our sport. It's truly an honor for me to induct Ed Kostolansky into our Hall of Fame. It gives me an opportunity to share some insight of Ed's lacrosse legacy and his contributions to our sport, and not only the sport, but our community. Ed comes from Corning, New York, where 6 to 8 inches of snow means nothing. In fact, his mother said, "I don't know what it's all about. What's wrong with you people around here?" Ed graduated from Boston College, whose slogan is, "Ever to excel." What an apropos slogan for a man like Ed. During his college years, he lettered all 4 years at Boston College. He captained his senior team, and I hope the stat's correct, but he's the 8th all-time leading scorer in Boston College history. Ed moved here in 1986 to take a job at NIH, and he has been successfully working with NIH for over 20 years, which is, again, a testament to his commitment. At the time he moved here, there were 3 club teams in Montgomery County. In 1988 and 89, Ed was the assistant coach at Paint Branch, a club team. Ed took the helm at Seneca Valley High School, which was a big powerhouse in football. Okay, they were known for their football tradition. From day one, Ed's vision was broader than his program and his players. On the sidelines, as Homer attested to, he was a very intense guy. And in talking with some of his players and some of his parents, you can talk about the leapfrog as you leaped your way down the sidelines to make sure that you were not only being able to see what was going on, but to be able to communicate to your players. One thing that was amazing about Ed was not only did he coached his team, but he knew every player, the name of every player on the opposing team. He really wanted to know everybody who was out on the field. He went out of his way to compliment the other players after a game, after a really hard-fought game. He would seek those kids out, and he would congratulate them. He has a great appreciation for the performance of a player, regardless of what team he was on. During the early years at Seneca Valley, Ed worked tirelessly to get varsity status for lacrosse in Montgomery County. And that sounds like an easy thing, but all the meetings, and it didn't come easy, and there was a lot of bureaucracy that had to be broken down to have that happen. And Ed just kept plugging along. Ed was also quick to point out that without the growth of girls lacrosse in Montgomery County and the leadership within the girls programs, that it would not have reached varsity status as it did in 1995. I had the pleasure of meeting Ed in the spring of 1995 when we embarked in establishing out-of-season programs. The very first time I met Ed was in his kitchen at his house. I think I had to step over a few big wheels to get in there. But Ed greeted me with any of you guys who know Ed, a 3-ring notebook. Okay, he was infamous for his 3-ring notebooks, and this one was about 5 inches thick. He set it down on the table, and before we even started talking about anything, he knew that I had coached at Lake Braddock, and I had played at Lake Braddock. And he asked me, "Pat, do you remember the score of the 1986 game between Lake Braddock and, I don't know, Langley?" And I looked at him and I was like, no, I have no idea. But what this book was basically the history of lacrosse in the Potomac chapter. He had every game, every record, scoring records, team records. And I was just amazed. I was amazed at his commitment to the game, but also to the history, to make sure that all this was documented. As we worked together for the next 7 years, we became friends. We shared a passion for the sport. Ed's commitment to the out-of-season programs was clear with a purpose, and that was to raise the level of play and to expose as many kids to the game as possible, and to make up for some lost time in Montgomery County, with the understanding that well-rounded athletes are the best lacrosse players. So we wanted the kids to continue to play the regular sports, play basketball, play football, and to continue on. This allowed Ed to touch more players and to have a more positive influence on more players than his own players. And again, it wasn't about Seneca Valley, it was about all the kids. Ed's basement. Fascinating. Okay, it's another testament to his appreciation for the history of the game. Literally a museum of lacrosse. I think he had just about every lacrosse magazine ever published. Very proud of the one with Coach Giblin on the cover when they won the national championship. But during one of my many late night visits over to Ed's house, he brought me downstairs, and you know, he was all excited. He was just aglow. And with delicate care, he pulled out this well-preserved, leather-bound book. I was like, you know, what is this? And what it was, it was an original edition of the 1869 first official book of lacrosse rules written by George Beers. It was an amazing book. Mr. Beers he organized the first non-native lacrosse team in Canada, and over the years, he was famous for his enthusiastic promotion of the game that led to its early popularity. And actually, Ed did exactly the same thing, okay? He was promoting the game and trying to grow the game and trying to make the game better for everybody involved. He shares many of the attributes of Mr. Beers. Through Ed's coaching career, he was dedicated to the growth and the history of not only his program, but the entire Potomac chapter. Again, if you look in the book, Ed has several accolades, and he's worked for years trying to better the lacrosse in this area. During his 12 years at Seneca Valley, his teams won several county, divisional, and state regional championships. He had an overall coaching record of 131-60. And what that did was it brought Seneca Valley some notoriety besides their football team. You know, Seneca Valley was really getting to be known for their lacrosse programs. Equally as important was his years of service in the many leadership positions at the county, state, and regional levels, attending, again, countless meetings in the pursuit of growing and improving the sport, including 4 years as president of this chapter. On a personal note, Ed has been a great mentor, a friend, and a positive influence on my life. Today, Ed is dedicated to the most important team, his family, his wife Gina, his daughters Alexandra, Amanda, and Cameron. For his many contributions and dedication to our sport and to our community, I'm honored to present Ed Kostolansky.
Many thanks tonight go to Pat for your many kind comments. No one has worked more tirelessly and often with less thanks than Pat Stewart to help develop, promote, and secure the place of lacrosse in this area. So I'm equally as honored, Pat, to have worked with you for so many years for the betterment of all the kids and for the betterment of the game in this area. Pat did play on one of the earliest of Northern Virginia's club programs back before we got varsity lacrosse, and there is no better friend of lacrosse than Pat Stewart. My many thanks also go to Homer, to Pat, and all the others, and to Pat on the committee for this fine event, something that we had never got going ourselves when I was involved, and it's tremendous to see that you guys have really put it together and pulled it off. It's a fabulous evening. It's tremendously gratifying to me to see the advance of lacrosse over the past 2 decades here in the greater Washington, D.C. area. We can all be excited about where it's headed in the future. Growing up, I had the fortunate circumstance of being raised in lacrosse-mad Corning, New York. Coach Urick seen that firsthand. Knowing as a youth that the hotbeds were New York and Maryland, and knowing that many Corningites played professionally and collegiately here in Maryland, I was particularly shocked on some of our summer vacations to come visit my cousins down here in Bowie, Maryland, and find out that they barely knew what the sport was and certainly had no team to play. It was shocking. I also attended lacrosse camp down at the University of Maryland one summer, and I could not believe that it wasn't bigger down here than it was. So settling here after college, I was not surprised, frankly, to see that the school system still didn't promote the game or support the game. and that most people really didn't have a clue about what lacrosse was. It's funny, most of them thought the lacrosse stick was for crabbing, or something else, maybe jousting. Nevertheless, what a difference 2 decades has made. Today, lacrosse is in many of our local public school systems. We compete for state championships. Our private schools are perennially ranked with the best in the country, both the boys and girls side. Our kids are honored scholastically as well as at the collegiate level with All-American honors and Player of the Year honors. Our kids play for Team USA. The kids return to the game now as coaches and officials. It's especially gratifying to see a lot of the kids that I've worked with in the early years now coming back and giving back as well. But most importantly, our youth programs continue to grow, and more kids are given the opportunity to discover the great game that we all know. Today, it's no longer unusual to see the kids walking around with their sticks, and people actually know what the stick is used for. They actually know what lacrosse is now. You see the Abercrombie and Fitch and all the other companies now picking up lacrosse logos. My wife sees the bumper stickers on the cars all the time, and makes a special note of that. It's growing, and it's going in a good place. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to contribute to this development of lacrosse here in the Washington, D.C. area. My endless thanks go to so many of you out there who truly have done as much, if not more, than I have done. Countless hours of hard work devoted to the game, all because we love this game. I greatly value the interesting, exciting, and wonderful adventure that I've enjoyed with all of you. I applaud my parents who are here tonight for setting a shining example of giving back to the community, for their participation and leadership in many civic organizations. I cannot approach the quantity or quality of what they've given back to their community. Also to my family, who's here tonight, thank you for being alongside me and behind me all the way. Thank you. I appreciate and cherish this honor.
Susan A. Merritt is an accomplished head coach of National Cathedral School, a generous contributor and participant in the national and local lacrosse organizations, a selector and coach of regional high school teams at USL National Tournament, a University of Maryland graduate where she was a 2-time captain, a member of the U.S. World Cup team, a Baltimore Hall of Fame inductee, and a frequent speaker and volunteer for lacrosse.
I first heard of Susan Abrams Merritt from a friend who was a referee and said there were these twins up at Friends School. They ought to get to come down to Maryland and play for me. But it was before you were allowed to recruit, and so all I could do was sit there and kind of hope that they were going to arrive. And alas, they didn't. And they went off to Earlham College for a year, but one came back, and it was Susan that came, and she came to the University of Maryland, and her sister Karen was our nemesis at Towson, so that every time we played against Towson, we had this thing of the twins of which way they were going. So we got one of the dynamic duo, but the other one was our nemesis whenever we played Towson. Susan was immediately a varsity starter in both field hockey and lacrosse and made honor roll, just arriving on campus. She was the front runner in women's lacrosse and was the beginning of the move for Maryland into the national forefront of women's lacrosse. So she helped us get ourselves there. She was one of our first great players. She also helped change the game. She was one of the first to master a both side cradle. In fact, many people thought she was left-handed. And women used to just play a very traditional game and play on the right side. She was also the first player to develop a non-dominant bounce shot, which was her own invention. Goalies had not ever a clue that it was coming, nor did I. And it was always one of those things where I said, oh no, don't do that shot, and go in. I'd say, yeah, great, that's exactly. She also knew how to go through a double team and set it up so that they would pick each other off and end up in a pile, and she would just kind of glide past them, looking at them like, what are you guys doing? So she could just go through one of the first players to just go through a double team. She had a stutter step that put many defenders on their heels or rears. And then she'd smoothly again just go right around them. Her fakes were so good that defenders sometimes checked her head, and her face and her teeth. There's a joke there, but we won't go there. But, she had a pinpoint pass, and when we really needed a goal, she just did it. So she could score almost at will. In fact, I think she had the record for the most number of goals in a season until just recently. I think she still holds the record for the most number of goals in a game, which is 9 against Georgetown before Kim was there. But anyway, but she's one of those players that made the coach look very, very good, and so she was fun to coach. And you never knew what creative, innovative move she was going to be coming up with. Her love of the game. She was a great player, creative, innovative, quick, fast, smooth, and of course she made the U.S. team and the squad and played on World Cup. But you could see her love in the game and their joy of movement and how she played. You could just see how much she just enjoyed the game. This love of the game has not stopped, and she's continuing to contribute and give back. And you read all about all of her great activities and her coaching and all the things that she does. She's continued to grow the game, be involved for future players and the future of the game. Susan does all of this with effortlessly and with quiet confidence, as Homer indicated. It's with great pleasure that I present a great player, a pioneer in the modern game, a great mentor and coach, a tireless worker, a great mom and super wife, and just a wonderful person, Susan Abrams Merritt.
I'd like to start by thanking Homer and the Potomac Chapter Board for selecting me for induction into their Hall of Fame. About a week before the slate of inductees were announced, I told Homer of my intention to resign from the board after 6 years of service. Let's see. I resign and then I get inducted into the Chapter Hall of Fame. I think I got the better end of that deal. I would also like to congratulate all of my fellow inductees. It's indeed an honor to be selected with such an illustrious group. And my last introductory thanks goes to Sue Tyler for agreeing to come all the way from Maine. I'm truly honored to have her here. She was one of the best coaches and role models I ever had the pleasure of knowing. And as much fun as she may have had coaching me, she has no idea how much fun it was to play for her. Just the best coach in the world. Thank you, Sue. I have several aspects of life in lacrosse that I'd like to touch on tonight. Honesty, integrity, loyalty, friendship, and legacy. All of these tenets have been ingrained in me through lacrosse. Honesty and integrity, these should go without saying. There's no doubt that these principles have been foremost in my life, taught through my parents, teachers, coaches, and camp counselors. I bring them up tonight because it's my heartfelt desire that through sports in general and lacrosse in particular, we can keep these principles alive in an age where they seem to be disappearing from both the sports scene and society as a whole. Loyalty. I believe that lacrosse has such strong ties and bonds that loyalty is a natural consequence of any engagement with the game. Loyalty comes in many forms, whether it's to family, friends, team, or job, but has been instrumental in my belief in giving back to the sport that has done so much for me. Friendship. I can't begin to touch on the impact this sport has had on me in terms of friendships formed around the world, from the British Isles, across much of America, and down through Australia. As a special thanks, I'd like to say thanks to my dear friend Jean Hancock, who came all the way from Vermont and brought Vermont weather with her. Thank you, Jean. But Jean, as an aside, 23 years ago, Jean was coaching at NCS and was taking a year leave of absence and asked me, as I was at a rival school, if I would consider applying for her job when she went on leave. And it was a huge decision. I had to give up a job that I was sure of versus a one-year job. And this is my 22nd year at NCS, and thanks, Jean, for leaving. We did have the pleasure of coaching together for several years as well. But it shows how these ties can go way back and interconnect in so many different ways. Legacy. I truly believe there is legacy in this great sport of lacrosse. From my father's father, who played at Baltimore's City College High School in the early 1900s, through to my children who are playing on their varsity teams at Sandy Spring Friends School right now. I also believe deep down, although it is not documented, that the sliver of Cherokee blood I have from my mother's side of the family must have something to do with my passion for the game. Now, I was going to do a little show and tell here, so bear with me. The first is just a poster. You've probably all seen it before, but that's my plug for U.S. Lacrosse. But it's the statue out in front of the U.S. Museum and Hall of Fame. And I just brought this to represent that Cherokee sliver and to show our roots of the game. And then this other wieldy thing that I had to bring on the subway, I'm surprised they let me on. Suspicious package, I'm sure. But this is a picture of my grandfather's high school team when he was 1904. I think he was a junior in high school. And I'm going to leave this up here so you can come up and see it at the end. It's a truly remarkable period piece, whether you know anybody in the picture or not. And it's one of those pictures, I knew my father had it, and he kept insisting he didn't have it. And I said, if I find it, can I keep it? And he said, yeah. So I found it, and it's mine. And now I want to share it with you. So I'll leave this up here. 1904, so it just had its 100th anniversary. Excuse me. This brings me to my final thanks to my family. I want to thank my husband Barry for his unyielding support of me as a player, coach, and a member of the board, and all the late nights that has entailed over the years. To my children, Ellie, 16, and my son, Will, 14, for all those nights without real dinners. I can only hope that your lacrosse careers give you a fraction of the pleasure and fulfillment that the sport has given me. I have no doubt that lacrosse truly gets in your blood, both literally and figuratively. And as I see it being played by my 2 children, 2 nieces, and a nephew, I know the sport's in good hands. Thank you very much.
Thomas E. Tufts is a successful head lacrosse coach of Robinson High School, coach of 7 Virginia State champions. In 1994, Washington Post All-Met Coach of the Year, a University of Massachusetts graduate, a tri-captain of the undefeated 1969 team, an All-American midfielder, a post-collegiate club MVP, a U.S. CLA All-Star, a career U.S. Army officer, a dedicated school counselor, and an active promoter of boys and youth lacrosse in Northern Virginia.
Dave Solkowski was supposed to be here, and obviously the weather held him up, so they went to the bullpen. They substituted one Polish guy for another Polish guy. This podium is a little bit iffy. There's another guy coming up after me, and we may be standing on the floor pretty soon. Just bear with us. You didn't notice that when the ladies were up here. This podium does have some issues. You heard mention of this rule book in 1869. What you didn't know is that Homer edited and wrote the floor. And I find it, there's a lot of officials wearing glasses around here. That explains a lot. But I'm going to follow suit, so bear with me. Coach Tufts is a truly unique person and someone that it gives me great honor to present to you. He's you've already heard, he's from the North Country up in Massachusetts, and a little difficult to understand at times. He's been away from that part of the country for most of his life. He's served in the military, a career military guy, served overseas in Korea, but he still sounds like he was born in the scoreboard at Fenway Park. Graduate of UMass, played lacrosse there for one of the great lacrosse coaches that has ever coached the game at the college level, Dick Garber. And he had a unique and interesting career there for sure. Coached at West Point for a man that coached me a little bit later, El Paisano. Coached at UMass with Coach Garber. And a career man in the military and served overseas. and then settles into this area and is a club player. Alexandria Lacrosse Club, I believe. What I'm going to ask a few gentlemen in the back row here to stand up. Would you please, fellows, stand up? Teammates, please stand up. Those characters in the back with the somewhat crazy-looking shirts are teammates of Tom's, and they've all got a pass from the home for 24 hours. Trust me, they'll make use of every minute of it. I truly believe that the games were probably interesting, but I'm sure the post-games celebrations were much more interesting. When Tom retires from the military and he decides to get into education, and he is an educator, much more so than a coach, he has to go back to school. And I'm sure he's in his, he's rounding third base and heading for home. And he goes back to college to get a degree so that he's certified to work in guidance, and no better field for him to get into than to be able to guide young people in high school. And it doesn't take Tom long not only to put Northern Virginia lacrosse and Robinson lacrosse on the map in many respects, but it doesn't take the teachers there long at Robinson High School to understand and appreciate what type of person he really is. And they bring to him many of their issues and many of their problems that they have to deal with some of the students. And Tom never said no. He was there for every one of them. Didn't matter who it was, male, female, freshman, senior. He would take the time to do what he could to have an impact on those people. He put Northern Virginia lacrosse on the map. Many of his former players, a few are here tonight, made high school All-American. I had the privilege of coaching a few of them at Georgetown. They make you look like you know what you're doing, like good players will do. He didn't really succeed in helping Scott score a lot of right-handed goals, but neither did I. So that's one thing we both had in common that we failed in. But he did put Northern Virginia lacrosse on the map, and he certainly will be missed in the Robinson program. I am certainly grateful that Tom Tufts has been a part of my family, not just for Scott's sake, but both my daughters and Linda and I. Very grateful for his friendship, proud to call he and Sue friends, and I'm certainly honored to present him to you tonight in the Potomac Chapter of the Hall of Fame, Coach Tom Tufts.
Thanks, Dave. First, I'd like to apologize tonight for not being terribly clear in my presentation. And the elder Coach Urick has always been quick to remind me that I'm from away from here, that my accent's a tad different. In fact, one time I had a timeout, and with a bit of excitement, I told my team, I said, "Damn it, guys, you're playing horse crap defense," or words to that effect. I can't recall exactly what. And as the huddle broke, one of my young sophomores turns to the guy next to him and says, is that part of our man-to-man or our zone defense? I'd like to thank the chapter for inviting me this evening. It's a tremendous honor. When I think about the folks who were recognized over the last 2 years, and the folks that are being recognized tonight, it's very humbling. And it also reminds me of all the breaks I've had to be involved with this game for almost 40 years. For me, and I was certainly available. An early break for me was not being overly burdened with other talents. I actually turned down a football offer after careful consideration. It's a very small college, and they offered me $50 credit at the school bookstore. It was not a football power, and I believe that was the 4-year package. And in baseball, I was passionate about baseball, as we are up in the Boston area. But I kind of moved from the infield to the outfield to the lacrosse field. That was my career. I had the stats to back that up. I think a real break for me was having just two great mentors at UMass. And I got there, and our freshman coach was a gentleman named Frank Shields, tremendous guy, football lacrosse guy. And he taught me firsthand how to work with guys whose only shortcomings were confidence and ability. And he had an undefeated freshman team with guys like that, and myself. Our varsity coach, Dick Garber, was probably the finest mentor that a young aspiring coach could have. Every decision Dick made, and Dave alluded to it, but every decision he made reflected his integrity, reflected his concerns for other people, and with that approach, he won 300 games. I think being a team captain for Dick was possibly as good a leadership training as I ever received to include my Army career. Dick opened a door for me to get out to West Point to coach, and there I had a chance to coach some guys who became lifelong friends of mine. I coached with a very young Dave Slavkovsky. It would have been fun to have Dave here to beat up a little bit. He's got a dry sense of humor, and I seldom win in a conversation. And I had people encourage us to give the Army a look, and it led to a full Army career. For years after that, my staff would always be a tad surprised when I would not race to the phone because I had received a call from General Slavkovsky. Dave knew how to get through. But for the next 18 years, I played and coached the game whenever I could. And I actually had 2 tenures with the Alexandria Lacrosse Club, and you've seen the first bit of it. The first group was probably a tad rowdy on a good day. And actually, the first time I came here, I'm in Army uniform, and some of the elderly members are here. And midway through the evening, management allocated a separate room for this group of people. He said, maybe we need to put them off somewhere where they can be by themselves. I kind of kept my glass in front of my name tag because I was in uniform, and I'm thinking, I don't want to answer the question the next morning, what happened at the university? A second group, a few years later, did all the right things when I had a heart attack on the field and probably saved my life. And Sonny Esposito, Ted Cowles did a great job that day, helping me out. Sonny actually had a pretty big day. He had probably 4 goals, 3 assists, a whole bunch of ground balls, and probably saved the coach's life. That's a good day. But I'm thinking that's all about good coaching. Obviously, here's a guy who is happy with his playing time, and he also feels like we're running the right offense. About that time, Kurt Voorhees gave me a chance to coach at the high school level for the first time, and that was enjoyable. And then the Robinson job opened up. And I had an opportunity to work with some great kids, great players, and of course 3 of them up here at Georgetown. A couple of those are here tonight. Some of those players were asking great things of today as I speak in other parts of the world. I work with great coaches, and because of medical stuff, I asked a lot of them. Fred McFarlane and Phil Polizzardi, Tom Marr, John Warner is here tonight, Dick Abood later. Then we had a couple of homegrown Robinson guys in Will Plath and Justin Fitzgerald, so they all stepped up and did a great job there. I also dealt with some great coaches. It's a great fraternity of coaches, and I know other people, Ed has alluded to that, the people you deal with, and Rob Worley and people of that caliber. It's been a lot of fun to have a chance to work with them. I would have to say, well, Dick Garber opened up doors for me to play lacrosse, and is probably my mentor and my hero. The person who has kept them open has been my better half, Susan. And she was supportive when we were raising 4 kids and I was playing and coaching lacrosse. When I upped the ante with a lot of medical stuff, she remained equally supportive. And I think I'd have to say the last 14 years would not have happened without her. I obviously married very, very well. Susan and I are at a point in our lives, and I look around this room, and there are a number of people who are about my age or recall some of the same experiences. But we're making decisions that involve 4 generations. And part of that's going to cause us to spend a great deal of time in Maine as well as down here in Virginia. And that's kind of exciting for us. Although Sue tells me that a good lacrosse guy in Upper Maine is essentially in the witness protection program. Being here tonight has given me just an absolutely wonderful chance to say thanks, particularly to my better half, publicly, and to close a chapter in my lacrosse life. And I'm certainly hoping that's not the last chapter, but I'm tremendously appreciative of the opportunity to speak with you this evening. Thank you very much.
Kimberly A. Simons is the dynamic head coach of national title contending Hoyas, a National Coach of the Year, a 2-time South Region and Big East Coach of the Year, a 3-time Georgetown Coach of the Year, a Princeton University graduate, where she was a 3-time All-American attacker, a co-captain of national championship team, a University Sportswoman of the Year, a member of the U.S. development team, and a frequent volunteer speaker and advocate of lacrosse.
Let me start by saying how grateful I am that Coach Urick came up here and tested the podium for me. When I worked at Georgetown, Coach Urick tested my food. In fact, he even tested food I wasn't going to eat. I hate it when he's going to have the last word, though. The last time I was here at the University Club was to see Erin Elby win the Tuarton Award. Let's hear it. Tonight I have the honor of presenting Erin's coach, Kim Simons, for induction into your Hall of Fame. I'm getting the sense I ought to hang around here more often. It's funny as how you get older, it's easier to remember things that happened 10 years ago than it is to remember things that happened 10 minutes ago. When I was preparing my remarks, I was surprised that I distinctly remember the very first time I laid eyes on Kim. She had arrived on campus to interview for an assistant coach's position in field hockey and lacrosse. And I was getting ready to go to the interview, and I saw this person hustling down the hall and struggling with her jacket and her bag, and she was all full of this pre-interview tension. And I remember describing this moment to a friend and her a few years later, and I described her as this stocky, nervous bundle of energy. And she was mortified that somebody would refer to her as stocky. Then a few years later, I would be at Kim's and Justin's wedding, and to no one's surprise, the Episcopalian minister that presided over the ceremony was a woman. And that day, the minister described Kim as precious. This time, I was mortified. Those of you who know Kim know if she's two things, it's not stocky or precious. Kim got the job as our assistant in field hockey and lacrosse. And shortly thereafter she was hired, the head coach of those teams parted ways with the university, and I needed to hire a new head coach. We advertised the job, and we had a handful of candidates. But I knew this wasn't going to be an easy job to fill. I knew that this was going to require a very special fit for a place like Georgetown and for what we had been through. I had been involved somewhat in the hiring of Dave Urick a few years before that, and I was somewhat spoiled by his coaching ability, his work ethic, and his knowledge of all the sandwich shops in the DC metropolitan area. Trying to match that last attribute with a woman was going to be difficult, I knew it. But when the time to make a decision grew short, I took Kim to dinner across the Key Bridge to a place called Pettibon's, I think it was, right across. It's gone under a number of names over these years. And we sat there and we talked about the various candidates. And it was clear to me that she knew what this team needed, and none of these candidates filled that role. So by the end, I said to her, listen, would you be interested in taking this job? Well, she didn't leap for joy or anything. She just kind of calmly said, yeah, I would be very interested, and, sure, And she knew, and I knew, but she knew more importantly that she was capable. And I had said to her there would be one condition on this job, that she would have to see me every day, because the previous coach only came to see me when things were desperate. And I said to her, I just don't want things to get away from us. So she did come and see me, even if it was just to say hello. And in that period of time, we became great friends and colleagues. She became a terrific coach. She had been a terrific athlete. She understood the need for focus and commitment and sacrifice. And most importantly, she was committed to teaching. One of the things that you need to know when you read through tonight's program, and I'm not going to go through that with you, all the accomplishments that she had, they were accomplished at a school like Georgetown with 5 scholarships or less, when everybody else that we were competing against had the full gamut of 12 plus. And I thought that was something that no one could quite appreciate, no one understood. So when you look at her record, bear that in mind. I truly believe, and I think you would agree with me, that coaches take on the character and the spirit of their coaches. And Kim's players and teams were carbon copies of her spirit. And I look at a group of them sitting over there tonight. The highest compliment I can pay them was that they were mirror images of her with respect to the quality of the experience they brought to the game. Kim has had a measurable impact on athletics and on the athletes that she has coached at Georgetown and on the way the campus perceives women's athletics. My mentor and close friend, Frank Rienzo, always reminded me that the most important person in a coach's life is their significant other or spouse. Justin played both roles in Kim's career, and in fact was even her volunteer coach for one season, the season that we went to that final that Sue mentioned earlier. The fact that Kim and Justin have been so important to this program at Georgetown had a great impact on me, and being around Kim taught me a great deal about being an administrator. My little science project here to turn the Eliza Doolittle of women's lacrosse into a Tualatin-producing coach was something that I think I learned much more from than she did. Early on, in the early days, she was a proponent of the ready, aim, shoot school of thought when it comes to dealing with parents and administrators. And I also had to teach her that forgiveness was not always going to be easier to get than permission, although some of this was my doing. While Kim's vocabulary belied her Princeton education, I've known very few coaches who could scare the other team when they were yelling at their own. I've been involved as a coach or administrator for over 35 years, and I've had the pleasure to be around a lot of very special people. Dr. Justin, the tall, quiet one, and Coach Kim, the stocky, precious one. Two of the most gifted and talented people I've come to know. And ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to honor them, to present Kim for the 2005 class of Potomac Chapter's Lacrosse Hall of Fame. Kim.
But as Dennis said, I obviously have a big voice. We've got that point across. First of all, thank you to the Potomac chapter, to Pat and Homer. I mean, at least a dozen phone calls today in my panic up in Baltimore.
Just get here, Kim.
Just trying to figure out planes, trains, and automobiles and everything else to get here today. But I appreciate it. And Tristan and the University Club. Obviously, this place has been a great supporter of lacrosse, both men's and women's. And we totally are appreciative to have such a nice place to come. It's like a vacation here. Congratulations to the other inductees. It's really an honor. It's listening to all of your accomplishments. It's quite humbling. To my former assistants who unfortunately were unable to be here, one was unable to be here in particular because of the weather up in, from Baltimore, and then one is a wedding in Denver, Bowen and Ricky, who especially the last couple of years made it possible for me to continue coaching during some very challenging circumstances. To Dennis, who now has moved over here. Words can't really express what Dennis and his wife Terry, she's around here somewhere, have meant to me and to my family. As he mentioned, when I got the job at Georgetown, I think I probably just turned 22 or 23. Basically, I was young, arrogant, ignorant, didn't know what I was doing, brash, all those things that he talks about in a nice way. Yes, I was all those things. And poor Coach Urick's daughters had to endure some of that in the early years. And whenever I see those players from the first couple of years, obviously I always give them a big hug and tell them thanks for enduring the ride. But through all of it, Dennis has been an incredible friend and mentor, supporter, very patient, very tolerant. And not only has he meant a lot to me in my professional life, but also my personal life. And some have already heard the story that a couple years ago when my husband accepted a fellowship in Atlanta for a year for medical training, I basically moved into an apartment with lots of cockroaches. It's a long story. It was really ugly. Had no place. I had to move out. Had no place to stay with my 2-year-old son. And Dennis kicked his son out of his basement apartment to allow me to move in. So if you want a great boss, there he is. And as far as you said, as the ready, aim, shoot mentality about it to administrators and parents, the ironic thing is I'm now a parent of 2, and now I'm now an administrator. So it all comes full circle. But I thank Dennis and his wife Terry. I know Homer's email to us said that thank yous are boring. But just basically, that was the gist of it. Basically, just give me just one quick second here. Another person that Dennis had mentioned was my husband Justin, who, there he is. He's 6'4", it's hard to miss, but he really has been quietly standing behind me for some time, and I often feel sorry for Justin when he comes to Georgetown. Because typically when we walk into the building or walk onto the field, I see all the men of Georgetown kind of look around and be like, oh, that poor soul. They take pity on him. And the fact is that he has been an incredible supporter, and through all of this, and my best friend Paige, who's sitting next to him, who has gone through all this with us as well, whenever it was time to make a big decision about whether I'd keep coaching or not, and whether I could do the year when he was in Atlanta, and when I could do with one more kid, and those kind of things, Justin's 2 things he would always say is you got to do what makes you happy, and you got to follow your dream. And as annoying as that was at times, because I wanted him to tell me what to do, he would always stick by those 2 things. And I have to tell everyone in this room that whenever you're in question, you're making a big decision, those are the 2 things that following your heart and making sure that you're following your dreams are really the most important thing. And for all of us up here who have had the joy of coaching lacrosse or being involved in lacrosse or reffing lacrosse or just being involved with the sport, probably all of us have selfishly done that, have been able to follow our dreams and follow our hearts, because really it is such a terrific game and a game of passion and something that means so much to each one of us. And a couple other people that I do need to just mention really quickly. My parents were supposed to be here. They had to stay with my 2 kids because of the weather and other circumstances. My father basically taught me everything I needed to know in terms of coaching. My mother, who never gets thanked in these situations, and of course, ironically, she's not here to hear this, but she is the person I have to thank, and I didn't ever really realize this till just recently, but she's the person that taught me how to have a voice. And as much as we all joke in here, and anyone who knows me, including Pat and Susie and Pat and Dennis and everyone else, the joke is that obviously I have a big voice. But I am thankful to my mother for that, because the fact is that one thing I've learned in the past 10 years in coaching is that somewhere from when you have these little girls, and I see them now with my children, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and these girls at that age, you see them, they are bossy. They will tell everyone and anyone what to do. They know exactly what they want to wear, what they want to do, how they want to do this. They'll boss everybody around. And then somehow or other, when I would get them at 18, I would often wonder what happened to that voice. And a lot of the young women that would come into Georgetown at 18 as young adults, they couldn't make eye contact. They were afraid to make mistakes. They were worried about letting people down. They wanted to please, their coaches, their teachers, their parents, and everyone else around them. And so one of the things that I really started to enjoy doing, and one of the things that, like I said, I was lucky enough that my mom had taught me, which I hadn't realized until recently, throughout my entire life, is the importance of having a voice. And it's not necessarily speaking loudly. It's not necessarily always getting your point across or voicing your opinion. It's just about being okay with who you are, and being okay with wanting to be the best. And that's one of the things that I think that a lot of young women, somewhere along the line, they think that it's a bad thing to say, you know what, I want to be great. And I would spend, and these women can attest to it over here, I would spend the whole year trying to get them to say, we want to be the best, I want to be the best, we want to win a national championship. And you know what? That's okay. And for all of us in this room who teach women or young girls, who coach, who have them as daughters or whoever they may be in contact, that is the one true gift that you can give them, is to allow them to have a voice, to tell them it's okay, to be confident, to be strong, to want to be the best, to want to win, and to want to be great. And I know that these young women over here, and that's the last thing that I will close with, is that I wouldn't be here, none of us would be here if it weren't for the players who played the game. And I didn't even know they were going to show up until today when I was trying to make the decision about how I was going to get here, and I find out that they're here, and so it's like, well, Pat's harassing me, and then these girls are coming, so I got to show up, in terms of the whole commitment of it. But, this group over here is a testament. They are obviously, example of many of the dozens of women that I've had the joy and the opportunity to coach. I am so thankful that throughout my coaching career that I was fortunate enough to have some young women that actually listened every once in a while and who went out there and gave everything they possibly could. And that was one thing that I was always very proud of the Georgetown teams, is I very rarely walked off a field and felt like the young women didn't give absolutely everything they had. And the women over there are certainly a testament to that. And when I sat down earlier tonight and we were talking, just about the things you kind of talk about with girls in college, and we were talking about ball dresses, and someone said they had one. I go, why can't you wear it to the senior auction? They go, well, we can't wear it to the senior auction because that's when the Final Four is. They still have their voice. Thank you so much for this honor. It's a real pleasure, and I'm just totally humbled, and I thank all of you for being here tonight.
David J. Urick is a collegiate coaching legend, a National Hall of Fame inductee, a National and ECAC Coach of the Year, Georgetown Coach of the Year, a second-ranking active Division I coach in winning percentage, a coach of 10 consecutive national championship teams at Hobart, a head coach of gold medalist Team USA, Cortland State graduate where he was a lacrosse captain, a generous supporter of Metro DC Lacrosse, and a frequent volunteer speaker on behalf of lacrosse.
Thanks. First things first, I might only have one right-handed goal in my career, but that's one more than you had, buddy. I was obviously fortunate enough to play for both Tom and obviously my father David as well. And, really, it's very fitting that they're getting honored together tonight because they share quite a few similarities in their styles of coaching. obviously they have an extensive knowledge of the game and as good a grasp on the X's and O's as any coach out there, and that's they wouldn't be here tonight if they didn't. But that's not the reason that they're Hall of Fame caliber coaches, because as good as they are at that, they're just much better people, and the impact they've had on the young men that have played for them, it extends far beyond the playing field, and it really is tough to put into words. And you can see some of the young men here tonight that played for Coach, and just rehashing stories in the lobby. I mean, it was just an amazing experience, and can't say enough about it. And that, you know, the wins and losses were great, but just the experience of playing for him was really just was unbelievable. And you know, you can look in the resume in the program, and he's got hundreds of wins and you know a bunch of championships, 10 in a row at Hobart that I was fortunate enough to be. Actually, I was kind of an annoying kid on the sidelines for a lot of those, but it was quite an experience. But you know, he'll be the first to tell you that too often in athletics, success is measured solely by wins and losses. But the good news for him is that even if you take his record out of the equation, he's one of the best in the business. And his players love him. They have a tremendous amount of respect for him. They flat out want to win games for him. And when you get right down to it, that's the biggest compliment you can give a coach. Doing my best to learn from him every day, as Matt Rienzo is as well. And I mean, that's what you strive for. You want your players to go out there and try to win games for you. And that certainly was the case with him. One of the best parts about playing for Coach was these little side comments he would make in practice, usually very subtle, very to the point, and they kind of kept the mood light. And one of my favorites, and I was trying to think of one where I didn't look like an idiot, but I couldn't think of one. So but one of my favorites was in this inter-squad, just a regular scrimmage at practice, and in the course of this scrimmage, there's this ground ball, which is about 10 yards away from me and 10 yards away from a good friend of mine on the team, on the opposing team at the time. Decided to forget about trying to pick the ball up and just run into each other as hard as we could, and like you do often with your friends at practice. So we kind of made eye contact. We had about 15 yards or so to get a running start. And unfortunately for me, the guy is like 6'4", 220-pound defenseman we had, All-American from Illinois. So I lost that battle big time. I don't know what, I had a moment of bravery that just was not a good idea and just got paved. So I was lying on the turf, like looking at like my ear hole. He just picked the ball and just kept running down the field. And Coach comes by, he's the all-time ref at these scrimmages, comes by, just looks down. You didn't hurt him, did you, Scott? And just keeps walking. He was okay. But he's able to get the most out of his players, and he knows when to push them, he knows when to ease off a little bit, and like I said, Matt and I are doing our best to learn from him every day, and want to do as good a job of following his footsteps as we can. So, you know, I got about a million things I need to thank this guy for, but I'll start with one tonight and just say thanks for being the best coach this sport's ever seen. Congratulations.
Discussed it earlier. Obviously, I'd like to thank Potomac chapter and specifically Homer for all you'll do here. Obviously, this ethnic food that they had here was great. If I had 3 hands, I'd kill myself. I ate myself around the world 3 times. Coach Tufts, who I've already had a chance to speak to a little bit, a special congratulations to you. One thing I neglected to mention about Tom in his playing career, he had one unique style. He had a way of reducing things to a most common denominator in a lot of ways, but as a defenseman, his first poke check was right to the throat. He got his attackman's attention right away. Certainly didn't have any trouble after that. And I'm lucky to have him coach my son, and I know Linda and I are proud to have he and Sue as our friends. My son Scott would run through a brick wall for Coach Tufts. I have a tough time getting him to take the garbage out. But he always manages to show up at mealtime. Coach Simons, who Dennis did such a great job of introducing, you can't help but be impressed by this young lady's intensity. She's a little bugger, but I'll tell you. I've watched her coach many times. We would come on the practice field right after the women many times. And they won a lot of lacrosse games at Georgetown where maybe they didn't have quite as much talent as the other team. But I think one of the things that you look at in a coach is how hard the kids play for that coach. And I'll tell you, those kids played hard, and I really enjoyed watching. More importantly, though, she cares. She cares about her athletes. Now she's my boss. I'll get back to you on that one. So far, so good. There's no doubt that this game, lacrosse, has been very good to me. It's been particularly good to me when I stopped playing it and started coaching. It's been a lot better to me then. My strongest points as an athlete is I just like to run into people. Didn't matter who, but just that was my asset. So obviously football was a good thing. Then all of a sudden my roommate in college introduced me to lacrosse. And you could still run into people, but now you had a stick, you could also whack them with it. So I didn't have to chase them as far. But for me, I was just very fortunate. I was in the right place at the right time as a coach. And Homer made mention of Jerry Schmidt, a gentleman that I owe an awful lot to. And I was his assistant for 9 years. And in my coaching career, I've had, and I think the true value, or anybody that's at the top as the head coach, is the quality of the assistant coaches that you have working with you. You know, the Dave Solkowskis, and the John Shushans, and the Mike Kubiks, the Bowen Holdens, those are the people that make you look like you know what you're doing. And I've had some great ones. Terry Corcoran and Hank Jancic, Mark Van Arsdale, Ricky Soul, Matt Kerwick. A lot of these guys coached with me, some of them up at Hobart, some of them down here at Georgetown. Most of them are out there now as head coaches. And some of them are out there trying to beat us. And that's okay. I will tell Matt and Scott, because they're both here right now, if you choose to do that, just make sure you buckle it up tight when you come to play Georgetown. But I've had one assistant coach for 34 years. It might be 33, it might be 35. We'll settle that later on the way home. I'm not real sure. I should know those things. My wife Linda's seen a lot of games in all kinds of weather. She has a keen eye for the game. She's a very subtle and usually pretty accurate analysis, critic, whatever. In my formative years at Hobart, I coached football, lacrosse, squash, and I was the ski school coordinator. Now I know that a lot of you it's not hard to imagine the football and the lacrosse part. The squash part might be a little tougher to imagine, but I guarantee you, if I got control of the tee, the other guy couldn't see a whole lot. And the ski coordinator part, that was exciting. I guarantee you I got everybody's attention on the hill, and I put new meaning to the term snowplow. But Linda's been, she's been my assistant for 33, 34, 35 years. She's got impeccable timing with her coaching points. Usually after a game, you know, we do whatever with the team, and then we taken tailgating to another level at Georgetown, and now we're on the way home, and we'll usually, you know, talk about other things other than the game, but she has a way of working them in there, you know, talk about maybe tomorrow you got to cut the grass, and then all of a sudden, you know, the comment comes out, I guess they don't allow you to knock the shooters down anymore, huh? something. I've done a lot of wallpapers. And then all of a sudden, didn't have time to work on Man Down last week either. She knows a lot about the game. Talk about raking leaves a few minutes later. I guess you're saving the timeouts for next week, huh? She's by far the best assistant coach I've had. She's my best friend. Got Mindy over there as well. Thank you. I would encourage you all, and I know many of you already do this in the room today. Homer's a great example of it. I think we all need to do this in some form or another because the game has been what it is for many of us. I would encourage you to put something back into the game. You can write a check. That's great. You can do that. U-R-I-C-K, right? But probably, what probably can be more valuable is your time. And if you can do that, then everybody will benefit. So again, congratulations to everybody here tonight. Drive safe on your way home, and let's get some dessert. Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it, the class of 2005. Let's applaud her.